Hello everyone. Today I'll be talking about the failings of the final seasons of Game of Thrones and doing a rewrite of one of the characters. There will be spoilers for pretty much the entire show, so only watch further if you're caught up on the show or don't mind being spoiled. Let's go. The hate for Season 8 of Game of Thrones is immense, and the critiques seem to have no end. I am absolutely on the side that thinks Season 8 was very bad, but I am also in the camp that thinks Game of Thrones has been going steadily downhill since mid-Season 4. Now, I like Season 4 just as well as Seasons 2 and 3 pretty much, but I could immediately tell that the missteps of Season 4 would have future ramifications far beyond what we had seen before. I'm thinking especially of Jaime raping Cersei and the steady degradation of the character of Stannis. Now, while people talk a lot about the more obvious mishandlings of the series, like the sand snakes, Wolverine Arya, fast travel and coffee cups, none of these issues are series destroying. That is to say that there is still room to care about the plot and characters despite this. If you can still follow, empathize and be fascinated by the leads, there's still room for enjoyment here. They messed this up over several seasons, and that is what I will go into and give my take on how to fix, so we can create a finale that somewhat resembles what we got, but that actually has emotional impact. To clarify right away, pretty much no issues I point out here can be blamed on the actors, directors and crew in general. It's all down to the writing, and therefore, by extension, David Benioff, D.B. Weiss, and I guess to a lesser extent, Bryan Cogman. It is important to keep in mind that every one of these three men are talented in their own right. Cogman wrote my favorite episode of the entire series, called Kissed by Fire. David Benioff wrote the book and the screenplay for one of my favorite movies of all time, The 25th Hour. And Dan Weiss, together with Benioff, wrote several scenes in the early seasons that were entirely new, yet still great, and adapted some scenes to be even better than in the source material. So yeah, these guys absolutely all have talent, and the question of how it all went so wrong at the midpoint, and especially in the home stretch of the series, is a question I hold out hope that will be opened up to and explored at some point in the future. I will split these rewrite videos by character and by some major events, starting with Arya. To me, the character with the most obvious break in their arc is Arya Stark. Arya was easily a top 3 character for me in the series up to and including Season 4. This is to be expected, as Arya in the books is also super interesting. Well, Arya breaks off from the source material hard at the beginning of Season 5, to quickly become almost unrecognizable. We now know that the Arya story they wanted to tell was pretty much the archetypical hero's journey, though with some missing aspects. There's a call to action, including her innocence lost and a split from her family. She meets a teacher to start her transformation, is led out into the real world and ultimately defeats the villain to end the story as a different person than she was at the beginning. In the books, Arya's journey is more of a descent into madness. What a rebel I am to declare this, even though we haven't seen the end of her book storyline yet. It seems like they decided to do a bit of each storyline, and as they are so incredibly different from each other, to everyone's surprise, it doesn't work at all. Before heroically defending Winterfell and quickly defeating the Night King, we see Arya make a child commit suicide, we see her gouging a man's eyes out as she kills him, and we also see her murdering an old man's, albeit a very evil old man's, children, baking them into a pie, making him eat the pie to then finally kill the old man along with, apparently, every single member of his family. After this absolutely psychotic behavior, Arya gets emotional reunions, acts as deliverer of justice in Winterfell, and badass hero for the rest of the show. This weird series of events makes whatever connection the audience might have had with Arya dissipate, like Spider-Man in Infinity War, and her sudden smugness doesn't help to improve anything. If we wanted Arya to suddenly leave the House of Black and White, return to Westeros and take up the role of a hero, here's a better way for it to happen. First off, a small detail. We need to establish Arya as a natural talent at almost anything the Faceless Men puts her to. In the series, she shows few signs of mastering her abilities, so it's quite jarring when she returns to Westeros and is suddenly a master assassin, swordsman, knife thrower, etc. By instead establishing Arya as a prodigy early on, the conflict with the Faceless Men could be based around Arya's hesitation to give up on her identity, and her at the same time quickly becoming extraordinarily skilled and dangerous. If we're really gonna make me a happy boy, we should introduce her walking powers. For people unfamiliar with the books, all the Stark children have walking powers like those of Bran to some extent. Arya at one point fends off an attack while blind, probably by walking into a cat and seeing the attack coming that way. Now, from there, we could continue the season for a while without changing much. Have Arya kill Meryn Trant every bit as brutally as she did in the show, but drop the pedophile stuff though. Killing Syrio is plenty of motivation for Arya to want to kill Trant. Simply reinforce that point. Arya will sneak into wherever Trant is staying. We'll use this opportunity to showcase newfound sneaking skills from Arya. She's more athletic than ever. After killing Trant, Arya looks at all the blood on her shaking hands. Then a handmaiden barges in the door, sees Arya who has a dark look on her face. The handmaiden looks down at the disgusting carnage before her and screams in absolute terror. After the handmaiden flees the room, a guard comes in, but Arya is already gone. We cut to a canal by the docks in the middle of the night. A red moon shines in the sky as Arya frantically tries to clean her bloody hands in the water. After she gets most of the blood off, there's a quiet moment before she starts throwing up. Shortly after that, she sees her own reflection in the water, every bit as bloody as her hands were before. She throws water in her face and frantically tries to peel away the solidified blood with her fingernails, only to scratch deeply into her own face, making more blood appear. Nudge nudge, book fans. We slowly pan away as she starts to cry. Returning to the House of Black and White, determined to get away from the city, Arya picks up Needle and runs for the docks as the sun starts coloring the skies. Going through an alley, the waif, in a black hood and cloak, sneaks up on Arya and tries to stab her, but much like in the books, Arya sees her coming by walking into a cat at the top of a building and quickly blocking the waif, pulling out Needle and dueling her. Show the goddamn duel! Arya continues to use the view of the cat as well as her own eyes to get an advantage and finally defeats the waif. Arya looks up at a window ledge some 30 feet in the air where Jaqen has been looking on, wearing a matching dark robe to that of the now dead waif, as he casually, playfully swings his left leg over the ledge. Arya defiantly says to Jaqen, "Aren't you going to try and stop me as well? Do you think you can?" After a pause, Jaqen says, "A man has doubts. A girl is truly extraordinary." Arya angrily responds, "I don't intend to look over my shoulder for you for the rest of my life," and points the bloody needle towards him. "Sadly, a girl doesn't get to choose." Jaqen effortlessly jumps down and rolls into a sprint. Arya makes chase as Jaqen rounds a corner at the end of the alley. As Arya follows, she sees that Jaqen has run into a now busy street. She quickly identifies 3 people with similar dark robes to those of Jaqen and gets a look at the face of 2 of them. None of them have Jaqen's face, but she's well aware that he could be any of them. She slowly lifts Needle towards one of them before quickly reassessing the situation and lowering the sword. She runs to a ship to finally get away from Braavos. Back in Westeros, Arya travels to Winterfell right away. Arya reunites with Sansa. They are both very happy and surprised, as they both thought the other likely to be dead. Bran needs to be completely changed, so I'll save that can of worms for another video. These changes will include my rewrite of the Night King, his mission and his motives, as his and Bran's stories should be closely intertwined. Arya gets properly informed about their situation and what has happened in the last couple of years. She is disgusted by the presence of Littlefinger in the castle, and him clearly being the highest in command after Jon has left, despite Jon leaving Winterfell for Sansa. While the news of the others sent chills down Arya's spine, What she's told about how the Freys are still alive and well truly angers her. After considering the Frey's troublesome military position, Arya requests for Sansa's aid in defeating Walder Frey and securing the twins. They agree to do a precise strike against Walder and his closest successors. With Walder dead and his closest successors captured, the Frey's opposition to the Starks will be at an end. Along with Arya goes Tormund, Brienne, Podrick, and Bronn Royce. When they arrive at the crossing, Arya uses her sneaky skills to find a way over some buildings and into the castle. Bronn quickly realizes that he's too old to complete the jumps and climbing required to get into the castle, so he stays in the forest with their horses and equipment. Night falls. Inside the castle, the gang splits up to find different people. Arya quietly takes down 2 men guarding a large door. Inside, Walder Frey sleeps loudly. Arya looks angry as she stalks up to Walder. She unsheathes the knife from its scabbard and slowly puts it to his throat, but stops herself, visibly reflecting on the situation. Arya sheathes the knife and pulls out a needle to thrust it into Walder's heart. He gasps and his eyes look at her in shock. Arya shushes his mouth and closes his eyes for him. Out in the hallway, Tormund and Podrick each bring out an old man at knife point, while Brienne brings out 2 men, one old and one of middle age. Arya takes over the capture of the younger of the 2. They walk out by the front door as the castle wakes and they slowly get surrounded outside. The Freys don't dare attack them with the team having their valuable hostages. They get all the way to the outer gate, meet up with Royce, pick up their horses, and flee the castle. The team makes a stop at the outskirts of White Harbor by a market to get supplies. At their camp, they're attacked by a large group of assassins and soldiers. Arya does alright for herself, so does Bronn and Tormund, but Podrick is woefully outmatched, and despite Brienne's best efforts to protect him, he is killed by the last adversary. As Brienne rushes to avenge him, Arya shouts for her to keep the man alive, so Brienne quickly disarms him and grabs hold of him. Brienne, barely keeping her composure, says, "Who sent you?" He doesn't respond, so Arya slowly inserts her knife under one of his fingernails to slowly peel it off. He shakes, but is unmoved. "You're a tough one," says Arya as Tormund jumps in and savagely bites the man's ear off, and the man screams in terror. Tormund steps back, spits out the ear and says, "You want more?" and makes a move towards the captured man again, but he immediately shouts, "Baelish! Baelish!" Brienne looks to Bronn, who meets her eyes and starts running towards the market. Arya looks confused at Brienne, who says to Arya, "There are witnesses," as a tear rolls down her cheek and she slits the captive's throat. She then moves to kneel before Podrick's body. Bronn pulls a woman to the side. "Are there any Ravenries outside the keep?" She is shocked, but answers, "Only one, on the roof of the smithy." We cut between Arya, Brienne, and Tormund, saddling the horses with supplies, prisoners, and Podrick's body. Bronn ascends the stairs to the Ravenry and sets fire to the cages while muttering, "Sorry." They regroup and ride hard towards Winterfell, hopefully arriving before Littlefinger receives news of what happened. Back at Winterfell, Arya explains the situation to Sansa, who is skeptical of Arya, but the backing of her story from Tormund, and especially Brienne and Bronn, quickly convinces her. After gathering soldiers to confront Peter in a tower, they are met with little resistance, as the majority of Vale's soldiers and knights under Littlefinger's command refuse to fight Bronn, and so the group only has to fight a smaller band of Littlefinger retainers and not a superior force, as they might have feared. Littlefinger takes flight over the walls with a couple of well-armored knights. Arya, Tormund, and Brienne are locked in combat at the base of the tower, but Bronn breaks free, locks eyes with Sansa, and runs up the stairs leading to the top of the castle wall. Confronting Littlefinger and his knights, Sansa yells for Littlefinger to give it up. He doesn't answer. Sansa angrily and emotionally talks about how Littlefinger never cared for her or the blood of her mother, only her status as the key to the north. Littlefinger says he would have loved her through and through. The knights attack Bronn, and after a hard-fought battle, Jon wins, but is injured to the point of not being able to stand. Littlefinger walks for the opening beside Bronchon, but Sansa steps in his way. Littlefinger pulls out a dagger, but Sansa, unflinching, steps closer to him, close enough to see deeply into his eyes. Littlefinger slowly lowers his dagger and Sansa suddenly pushes him over the side of the wall, down towards the frozen moat. Drifts of snow at the side of the wall soften his fall, but we hear a snapping noise as his ankle breaks. Littlefinger, red-faced and furious, starts limping towards the woods, and as he gets there, we see a final shot of him gasping for air in the cold. Sansa looks on from the walls as Littlefinger disappears into the woods. Alright, we got a little off track from Arya here, but at this point we have established Arya as a much more righteous and sympathetic character than what happened in the TV show. Littlefinger doesn't go out on a pathetic whimper, but loses by underestimating the martial ability of our heroes, much like he did when he challenged Brandon in his youth. Arya should not be the one to kill Littlefinger, as the two of them have pretty much no former history, but here she is still somewhat responsible for his ultimate defeat. I have a lot of changes in mind surrounding what was the Battle of Winterfell in the show. I'll go into detail about this in another video, but I'll summarize the big points around Arya here. She is strangled by the Night King like she was in the series, but she does not kill him. However, him holding her by the neck covers some of her body with a thick sheet of ice. After the battle, she is kept at Riverrun, and we learn that she has lost her nose, as well as several fingers on both hands to frostbite. Arya is very broken and can no longer support the North in their further endeavors. A couple of episodes later, we see Arya grab a horse and dejectedly leave Riverrun. One of the bigger mistakes of the series to me was the story of the Hound. I think his story should be about him changing from a man living for the thrill of killing with a thoroughly nihilistic worldview into a pacifist trying to atone for his sins. I would choose to not have the Hound reappear after Arya leaves him for dead in Season 4. That is, until the very last episode. Keeping that in mind, here's how I would wrap up Arya and Sandor's story. In the Riverlands, we get a single scene where Arya talks to a courier in an inn. Speaking about the great warriors of the world, he brings up Great John Umber, who he thought was an even more imposing figure than the Mountain himself, and Arya boasts of having met both Syrio Forel, the first Sword of Braavos, Brienne of Tarth, and Sandor Clegane. Furthermore, she says she doesn't think anyone could beat them in a fair fight. The courier peeks up at this and says that he thinks the Hound is alive. While delivering a package to the monastery on the Quiet Isle, he saw a gravedigger with a scarred face, broader of shoulder than his own horse. Arya is shocked, and after a moment of thinking, she asks for directions. He warns her that women aren't exactly welcome at the island, but she doesn't care. In one of the very last scenes of the series, Arya crosses a bridge to Quiet Isle at dawn in a light rain. She leaves her horse by the temple and walks up a hill filled with small but nicely set graves. At the top of the hill there's a tree, and she sits beneath it. She forgets where she is as the view of the lake takes her in. The sun reflects beautifully over the water. After a minute, she looks over her shoulder to see a huge hooded man with a shovel walking up the hill. He stops at a patch of grass and takes off his hood. It is the Hound. Arya secretly looks on from a distance while she slowly moves towards him. He sticks his shovel in the ground but sees Arya before he can pull it out and stops in his track. He looks at her, stoic yet clearly sad. Arya isn't a pretty little girl anymore. She's scarred over her cheeks and her nose is almost entirely missing. Arya cannot meet his eyes, so she looks at the ground instead. After some silence, Arya makes fists with her hands as her whole body shakes, and then she finally speaks. I'm sorry. She starts crying, first silently, and raises her left hand to her face, wiping away tears. The hand is missing 2 fingers. Sandor looks on silently. A few seconds go by before Arya totally lets go of her hard exterior and falls to her knees in a much louder, uglier cry. Sandor makes a move to possibly comfort her, but hesitates. It slowly stops raining. The scene ends with silhouettes of Sandor and Arya in front of a beautiful dawn over the lake, surrounded by the graves of the dead. Okay, that's it for my rewrite of Arya. These final seasons of Game of Thrones have been truly disappointing to me, as well as to many others. Every time I get disappointed, I try to keep in mind that, hey, it wasn't as bad as Beyond Two Souls, and that's the only reconciliation for me in this case. We can still dream of what the story could have been, and I hope you enjoyed listening in on my little fanfiction here. There are links to the creators of all the beautiful artwork in the description, along with details about the music I used and their composers. Thank you for watching. See you next time.